Something shifted inside this organization over the last few hours. An unexpected signing just shook up this roster, and honestly, it says a lot about what the Vikings are trying to become defensively heading into 2026. The pressure around this team is growing fast. Veterans are fighting time. Young players are being thrown into bigger responsibilities, and Minnesota clearly isn't sitting back waiting for answers anymore. This front office knows the margin for error is getting thinner. But one move that almost nobody saw coming may have just changed the emotional direction of this entire offseason. The second Minnesota moved on from a major piece of their edge rotation during the draft, you could feel the concern spreading across the fan base. Not because people don't believe in Dallas Turner. Vikings fans absolutely believe in him. That's actually the point. The organization clearly believes he's ready to become a full-time starter opposite Andrew Van Ginkel. But once you look past those two names, the reality gets uncomfortable fast. The depth behind them feels dangerously thin for a team trying to make a serious playoff run. Bo Richter, Chaz Chambliss, Tyler Batty, Cameron Stewart, Arden Walker. There's developmental upside there, sure, but asking that group to survive a full NFL season while Brian Flores keeps dialing up pressure packages every week, that's risky football, especially if injuries start piling up by midseason. And that's exactly why the Joey Bosa rumors suddenly started feeling believable. Bleacher Report naming Minnesota as a potential fit wasn't random speculation. It actually lines up perfectly with what this defense needs right now. Experience, rotational power, somebody offenses still have to respect on third down. And even at 31 years old, Joey Bosa still flashes moments where he looks capable of wrecking games. The injuries are part of the conversation now. They have to be. Nobody's pretending this is peak Chargers-era Bosa anymore. But when he was healthy in Buffalo last season, there were stretches where his hand usage, leverage, and instincts still looked elite. Flores could absolutely find ways to maximize that in limited snaps. And honestly, that's where this gets interesting. The Vikings aren't searching for a superstar savior here. They're searching for survival depth around two starters they trust deeply. Adding a veteran like Bosa also feels very consistent with where this franchise is mentally right now. They still believe they can compete. They still think this defense can become one of the nastiest units in football if the pass rush stays healthy. But at the same time, Rob Brzezinski and the front office are trying to recover financially after some painful cap decisions forced Minnesota into difficult roster cuts. Every dollar matters now. Every veteran contract matters. So, if they pursue Bosa, it means they truly believe there's still enough left in him to justify the gamble. And Vikings fans know how these veteran swings can go. Sometimes they become the missing piece for a playoff push. Other times the injuries hit again and everybody wonders why they ignored the warning signs. That's why this rumor feels more tense than celebratory right now. But man, if Flores gets even one more productive season out of Joey Bosa, this defense suddenly becomes a nightmare to prepare for in late-game situations. While everybody keeps focusing on quarterbacks and flashy names, the Vikings quietly made another move that tells you exactly what Brian Flores wants this defense to become physically. Because Isaiah Loudermilk isn't arriving in Minnesota to rack up headlines or chase sack numbers. He's arriving to do dirty work, violent work. The kind of trench football that decides whether a defense survives December football or collapses when teams start running downhill at them. At 6'7" and nearly 300 pounds, Loudermilk gives the Vikings another massive interior body after a season where the run defense simply wasn't good enough. That part matters. A lot. Minnesota finished near the top of the league against the pass in 2025, but against the run, 21st. That doesn't fit the identity Flores wants, and everybody inside that building knows it. Vikings fans felt it too every time opponents controlled the line of scrimmage in key moments in shortened games. So now you're seeing the front office attack that weakness from every angle. Caleb Banks arrives through the draft. Dominique Orange joins the rotation. Eric Johnson gets added. Young linemen like Levi Drake Rodriguez and Tyrion Ingram Dawkins continue developing. Then Loudermilk steps into the picture as another affordable piece with size and length capable of occupying blockers and freeing linebackers behind him. That's the role. Nobody's asking him to become Aaron Donald. Flores wants interior linemen willing to eat chaos so edge rushers and linebackers can attack freely. It's ugly football sometimes, but championship defenses are built on players willing to sacrifice individual numbers for the system. And there's another reality behind this move too. Finances. Minnesota had to get cheaper this offseason. That's why difficult decisions happened with veterans like Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen, and Jonathan Greenard. The Vikings entered the offseason dealing with cap pressure, and now the organization is trying to rebuild depth intelligently instead of throwing massive contracts everywhere. Loudermilk fits that philosophy perfectly. Cheap contract, physical upside, system fit. Sometimes those are exactly the moves that quietly stabilize a roster over the course of a long season. And honestly, there's something encouraging about the way this front office is rebuilding the trenches. They're not panicking. They're targeting size, toughness, and rotational versatility. If even a couple of these lower-cost moves work out, Minnesota's defensive front could become younger, more durable, and nastier by the middle of the season. But if they miss, then suddenly this roster starts feeling much thinner than Vikings fans want to admit heading into a year with serious expectations attached to it. There's a strange emotional cloud hanging over this team right now, and it revolves around one of the most respected players ever to wear the purple and gold. Because the longer Harrison Smith waits to make his decision, the more complicated this situation becomes for everybody involved. The Vikings still want him back. That part feels obvious. You don't just replace somebody like Harrison Smith emotionally, strategically, or culturally overnight. This man has been the heartbeat of Minnesota's defense for over a decade. 15 seasons potentially. Think about that. Entire eras of Vikings football passed while number 22 kept showing up every Sunday making impossible reads look routine. But now the waiting is starting to create tension. Judd Zulgad said it plainly. The Vikings need an answer soon. And honestly, he's right. At some point, the organization has to know how to structure the safety room heading into camp. Young players need reps. Roles need clarity. Leadership needs definition. You can't keep everybody frozen indefinitely waiting for one final decision, even when that player is a franchise legend. That uncertainty eventually starts affecting the entire room. That's the brutal side of football nobody enjoys talking about. Harrison Smith absolutely earned the right to take his time. He sacrificed too much for this franchise not to have that respect. But Minnesota also has to think about the future of the defense beyond nostalgia. And emotionally, that's hard for Vikings fans because Harrison represents more than production. He represents continuity, intelligence, stability during years where this franchise constantly battled heartbreak and transition. Losing him wouldn't just mean replacing a safety. It would feel like officially closing another chapter of Vikings football history. And while all that uncertainty hangs over the defense, another emotional storm is building at quarterback. Because the Kyler Murray and J.J. McCarthy situation suddenly feels very real now. Alec Lewis and Tom Pelissero both confirmed the competition is legitimate, and that changes the emotional atmosphere around this team immediately. Kevin O'Connell isn't handing anybody the future anymore. Every rep matters now. Every throw matters. One bad stretch in camp could completely shift momentum. Kyler Murray enters camp with experience, explosiveness, and pressure to prove Arizona didn't define his ceiling. Meanwhile, J.J. McCarthy is fighting to prove injuries and inconsistency won't define the beginning of his NFL career. And honestly, Bleacher Report calling this quarterback battle the key to a potential dream season makes perfect sense. Because if one of these quarterbacks truly elevates under pressure, this roster suddenly becomes dangerous. The defense is talented. Justin Jefferson is still one of the best players in football. The offensive structure is stable. But none of it matters if the quarterback position becomes unstable again. That's why training camp feels massive emotionally this year. Minnesota isn't just evaluating talent. They're trying to discover who can carry the weight of a franchise desperate to finally take the next step. And then came the Blake Cashman conversation. And honestly, it felt like one of those moments where analytics culture completely disconnects from what football teams actually are emotionally. The second PFF floated Cashman as a possible trade candidate, a lot of Vikings fans immediately pushed back. Not because Blake Cashman is a perfect player, he's not. His grades dropped in 2025. His coverage numbers weren't nearly as strong. Those concerns are real. But football isn't played entirely through spreadsheets and contract timelines. Cashman matters to this defense in ways that don't always show up neatly inside grading systems. Watch how Brian Flores uses him. Watch the communication before the snap. Watch how often teammates feed off his energy. That stuff matters deeply inside NFL locker rooms, especially for a defense already undergoing major transition this offseason. And sure, people point to Minnesota drafting Jake Golday and extending Eric Wilson as possible signs the organization is preparing for life after Cashman. Maybe that's partially true long-term, but this doesn't feel like the season to start subtracting core defensive leaders from a roster trying to compete immediately. That's the key part of this whole discussion. Are the Vikings rebuilding patiently, or are they trying to win now? Because if this team genuinely believes it can make noise in January, trading away one of the emotional centerpieces of your linebacker room before the season makes almost no sense, especially after already losing veteran presence elsewhere defensively. There's also something uniquely Minnesota about Cashman specifically. Fans connect with him differently because he plays with the kind of edge this city respects. Toughness, physicality, accountability, effort every snap. Those players become emotional favorites around here fast. And maybe that's why the trade rumor irritated people so much. Vikings fans are tired of constantly hearing about the future while trying to hold on to a roster that still feels capable of competing right now. They don't want to keep sacrificing pieces of the present for hypothetical long-term flexibility. Not anymore. Not after years of almost. And if Minnesota did move Cashman, it would immediately put even more pressure on younger defenders to grow up fast. So unless the Vikings are blown away by some unbelievable offer, moving Blake Cashman right now would feel less like strategy and more like creating another unnecessary hole in a defense already trying to redefine itself emotionally, heading into one of the most important seasons Kevin O'Connell has coached yet. This franchise feels like it's standing right on the edge of something right now. Maybe it becomes the season where all these difficult decisions finally pay off. Maybe it becomes another painful reminder of how hard it is to build a true contender in this league. But through all the uncertainty, one thing never changes. Vikings Nation keeps showing up. Through every quarterback battle, every roster shakeup, every emotional goodbye, we stay invested in the purple and gold because this team means something deeper than wins and losses sometimes. And honestly, that emotional connection is exactly why every move this offseason feels heavier than usual. So keep believing, keep debating, keep riding with this team. Stay tuned. SKOL Vikings, let's go.